Hello, everybody. I'm Alan Newberg, and I am going to be the coordinator for this particular meeting. So just a little bit about me personally, that I'm one of the founding members of Collective Visions Gallery. And probably more than any other member, I'm the person that's responsible for the gallery sponsoring this CVG show itself. So this is going to be a panel discussion, and we have three panelists that the first is Michael Laughlin. And Michael Laughlin is a faculty member at Olympic College, and he's number one, and number two is going to be Fred Nicholson. Fred Nicholson is an artist and a poet, and and sometimes he does some drama things as well. So that's the thing. And the third participant is Anne Sweet. So those are going to be our panelists. So the idea really is for us to generate a discussion around the topic art and artists in the time of Corona. So I don't think we need to explain much about that, except for to say that we're talking about the time of Corona. So we're not limiting ourselves just to the disease of Corona. We're talking about anything that's been happening in our lives in this period of time since Corona struck our nation and our world and our lives. So that's what we're up to. So I'm going to ask each of the panelists to give a very brief description, a little introduction of themselves, and then once they have done that, we'll start working on some questions, and so they will be able to ask each other questions after they finish their short introductions, and they will be able to address either in response to each other, or I have some questions that I would suggest. In fact, some of the ones, one of the questions I think everybody wants to know about everybody else is, how has the pandemic affected you personally? And that's a question, that's a standing question. And how has that impacted your art? And finally, a third one is, how has it impacted your employment or sales? So we'll just leave those three out there as questions that perhaps as our panelists might address some of those things or any other thing they'd like in their presentation. So Michael, we're going to start with you.
Hello, I'm Michael Laughlin, artist, art educator, shut in. I'm going to make this quick so we can pass it along and then maybe get the discussion rolling. I work primarily in digital media, but as well figurative oil painting. But especially with the pandemic, I live alone. It is the greatest luxury. So I have all this time to myself, but also there are limitations. So especially since the pandemic, I'm working primarily digitally, much less of a mess. And plus, as a professor at Olympic College, I have to be teaching from my studio space. So I have limited space now. So that's, there's positives and negatives. You work through it, and part of my working through it is, well, I pretty much work digitally at this point. I'm going to pass it on over.
Okay, Fred, you're going to be next.
Okay, my name is Fred Nicholson. In March, I was in the process of prepping the garden. I do it every year, so that wasn't a big change. As a reclusive, I don't party or socialize a lot, so I had to stay in more often. Not a big deal. My interests can be seen in the art in the art and the writings that come through me. I'm an observer. I observed naturally active young people sit at home watching a black man being suffocated to death on their mobile screens. Young folks don't sit and watch, they act. Then I observed all colors and sexual persuasions in the streets protesting the ongoing acts of inhumanity. Donald Trump appeared as a gift to all of us in different ways this year. I've witnessed people of color suffering in multiple ways. Not an inkling about that from Mr. Trump or his administration. His messages were, let's make America great again. Keep them out. Support the police. Black Lives Matter is radical, and get back to work. The evolvement of the young people hasn't been clearer to me than this year, during this time of unnecessary deaths versus the need to generate more capital for the few. I observed that sometimes the greatest gifts may be seated in the worst tragedies. This COVID-19 pandemic has caused me to listen, hear, trust, and to act more on what comes through. It's more so in my writing. I feel a lot more empathy and compassion for folks that have lost loved ones and are less fortunate than I am. Just today, I had tragic news from a very dear friend. I'm used to communicating on stage as someone else, or writing and creating from the privacy of my own home. The current happenings have caused me to look deeper inside and to have a willingness to receive and share more outside. My first use of Zoom was 3 weeks ago, and here I am close to relating face to face with others, close. More these days, I respond to that intuitive voice and follow my feet. And here I am. Thank you.
So Anne, you're next.
I'm Anne Sweet, and I'm a poet and a visual artist. I have a studio in the Georgetown, at Equinox Studios in the Georgetown area of Seattle. I feel like I wasn't impacted as much as an artist as some other people at Equinox were, who live by their art. I worked for an organization that supports an agricultural industry, and so we were able to continue working in order to care for the animals and that sort of thing. We were impacted in ways such as our equine art show was not able to take place, which is a nationally recognized art show with a 36-year history. So because there were not fans at the racetrack, we were not able to have the art show. And other ways I was impacted in terms of being able to show my art. We have a rather popular, or had a rather popular art walk on the second Saturday of every month that usually was pretty well attended. And so not able to show work and interact with people face to face in that way, although we did have one industrious anyway, one of our metal workers at Equinox Studios, Tabasco, figured out a way for us to continue virtually. So from about May on of last year, those art walks have taken place virtually on Facebook. We have somebody that walks around with a mic and a camera, and so we're able to interact with them. Everything's sanitized and socially distanced and that kind of thing. So the things I've found fascinating about, I mean, there were pluses and minuses. As a poet and spoken word artist, it's, as other performers had to learn to do things by Zoom as we are now, the interaction with the audience is different and not quite as fun and interactive, but it's a new way of doing things. And on the flip side of that, I found myself and others being able to participate in events in a far wide-ranging scope or distance because of Zoom. So, like for example, Earshot Jazz, I was able to see some concerts that I might not have seen otherwise. And so pluses and minuses both ways. Definitely not the one-on-one interactions that we've had in the past, but pluses in other ways, being able to see and reach and hear and listen to people that are further afield that we might not otherwise get to connect with. So.
Thank you, Anna.
I'd love to comment on that, because that's a wonderful point that I've experienced with teaching, because I teach my classes using Zoom. We meet at regular class times, twice a week, 3 hours per class, and it's just like this. And we lecture, we discuss, we draw together. Students are constantly giving their work, uploading their work, so I can look at it real time and give them feedback. And one of the advantages of this, there are students who were registered at OC, but once the pandemic hit, they were forced or chose to relocate outside of Bremerton, but they could still attend the class. So every quarter since we've been doing this, and it's been about almost a year now, I've had at least one student in each class that hasn't even been in the state. I've had students in Texas that were still in the class. I've had students in Arizona, which was really great when the daylight savings time kicked in and all of a sudden they're off an hour from the scheduled class.
Oh.
I had a student in Hawaii who was, we're here, she's in Hawaii, so I had to flunk her on principle for that. But it was really spectacular that we were able to accommodate these long distance situations and still have a regular class. So it's a wonderful point, Anne, and I thought I'd share that there are definitely some advantages. What we're going through now could not have been successful 10 years ago. We have the technology now that we can meet. Even if there wasn't a pandemic, we'd probably be canceled today. Look outside. I'm not driving in that, but we're still able to do this.
Yeah, that is true. I would have definitely had to cancel driving to Bremerton if we were having this at CVG, although that would have been awesome too, but wouldn't have happened in the snow.
So I'm going to jump in with a little piece myself that I was preparing to have a feature exhibit with 18 pieces of the large-scale sculpture at the Port Townsend Northwind Arts Center, and that was to open on the 2nd of April, and so I was preparing to do that as the pandemic got more and closer, and was worried about it. But ultimately, they had to cancel or actually postpone the show. So that kind of turned out to be kind of a good thing for me on a couple of bases. One of them was that the main piece that I was working on, which was to be kind of the centerpiece for the show, I wasn't quite finished with. So it gave me a couple of more weeks to really finish that piece up right. I would have been able to show it, but it wouldn't have been quite complete. Nobody would have known it but me. The other thing that did is then, with the extended period afterwards, I had wanted to do a catalog for the show. So I actually produced an exhibition catalog that will go with the show that's now scheduled for April 1st in Port Townsend. And so it's quite a lavish catalog. I don't know if you can see it or not, but maybe you can. So that's going to happen. So it gave me the opportunity to do a better job with my show in there. so that's, so it was an unwelcome but welcome pause.
I'd like to add my 2 cents regarding Zoom. This is a totally new world for me. I'm just used to having something between me and people. You know, my art. People look at my art, not me. My writing, people gauge my writing, and I can relate to my writing, or my sculptures, or it's never me. Even on stage, I'm a different character. So this pandemic, this year, has led me here where now I'm past the stage of having something in between me that I can, oh yeah, that or that character. But now here I am, you know, and it's a big change. And it's the technology isn't that comfortable, but being here in front of you folks, in front of people, I'm used to working with a person one-on-one, meeting one-on-one. This is great. It's a new environment. Um, I never thought I'd 2 weeks ago, Zoom? What's Zoom? Oh, young people use Zoom. I don't know anything about Zoom. And here I am, you know, so I was sort of forced in some ways to move into this environment because it's time for me to do so. It's tragic, and at the same time, I'm thankful. So that's my 2 cents.
We did have sort of an ironic situation with one show that I had 2 pieces accepted. And this was kind of sad in a way because it was a show entitled Touching Moments. Touching Moments Art from the Heart, I think is what it was, the full title. But it was curated by a woman who is visually impaired. And so the very point of this exhibit was that all of the pieces included were tactile pieces. And the show was designed so that, you know, it would be interesting for people who could come and view it visually, but also for the visually impaired, they could come in and interact with the art by physically touching it. And they also had an aspect, a recorded aspect, so that people could listen to a description of each piece that was in the show. So they originally delayed the show because of the pandemic, and then things kind of loosened up, and we thought the show was going to happen, and all the art went to the gallery, and then within a week they had to shut down again, and then they reopened and then had to shut down again. So that was kind of the sad, it was just a type of show that you could do virtually, and they did have it online with the images and the recordings, but it just lost that whole people being there in person and actually touching and interacting physically with the pieces of art. Similar to the sculptural pieces at Alan's show, not that people would necessarily be touching them, but just the whole 3D aspect is one thing that's a little bit hard to translate into the virtual world.
So any downsides to the technical thing that people have, or has anybody I guess here's a question: has anybody chosen elements of this period of time as themes in your work? How's it affected the nature of your artwork itself? Has it changed what you're doing, or what topics that you're interested in?
Yeah, I can respond to that. Basically, I've developed my collages. I used to do them and cut out the images with scalpels. That's a collage behind me, and nothing on it is digital. But I've developed a trimmer, and so what's happened is that I'm moving more towards writing. So I write something, I put it on my Facebook page, on my website every couple of days, and it's been about Black Lives Matter. It's been about the Trump era. It's been about various aspects, the way that people look at how we look at each other, how we observe each other, because I basically do observe things. One thing I will say, not about me, but about Alan's work. Um, I saw your work at the Bainbridge Island Museum, and it's very tactile. So seeing it, I mean, it's beautiful. So see, and yeah, it's form and shape and dimension. And so seeing it like this would be very, very difficult to really get a heartfelt feeling of it, you know? Like maybe my work's two-dimensional, it's a bit different, but something that's three-dimensional, I think it has to be touched, if not with your hand, with your heart and your eyes. So yeah, that for me, I can see that difference immediately, you know?
Yeah, and that's something I've been wrestling with even before COVID, but especially in the past year, is even working two-dimensionally, being in front of the work versus seeing an image of the work online. That's a completely different experience. I think we've all seen a Mark Rothko on the internet. We've all seen that, but standing in front of a Mark Rothko is an experience. Even though it's a flat piece, even though it's two-dimensional, there is that different experience. And how is this work supposed to be experienced? And I don't think that it's supposed to be experienced like this. I don't think it's supposed to be just this scroll of work that zips by and maybe you pause and then you just keep scrolling. So that's something that I've wrestled with for a while, but especially with COVID, is where is this work going and how is it going to be viewed and how can it actually benefit or not from that experience of being viewed? And the content of my work as well. We got COVID. Before COVID, we had this division that's been going on quite some time. I think we're aware. But especially with COVID, that just got amped up. They cranked the volume up to 10 on that. Because now what we have is this duality of reality. We have this pandemic, and then we have, no, it's not real. We have people who are wearing masks and taking precautions, and those who are not taking any precautions at all. So we have these conflicting reports coming in, reading the news. I don't know whether to scratch my watch or wind my butt. I don't know what's going on there because there's two conflicting realities. So I'm working that into my actual artwork, that the realities that we're experiencing, they're not aligned at all whatsoever. So it's just creating this this distortion.
So we might call that simultaneity. That's what they called it in the 19th century, or in the early 20th century, in the early 1900s. There was a lot of interest in simultaneity, you know, that suddenly transportation and communication was so much faster than it had been, that people were able to experience more. So we're experiencing the same kind of thing that some people have credited as being behind such things as cubism, and so that's a kind of aspect. But there's a lot of contradiction in experience today, which is what I think you're talking about.
Also,
and there are definitely there are people with one set of reality and another set of reality, and there's this dissonance that is created.
Yeah.
So actually trying to discern what is the reality, especially in this shut-in experience, when all the information is coming second, third, fourth hand over the internet. It's I don't want to so much say stressful. It's definitely unique. It's been a unique experience. So
what I wanted to say was that when I was younger, a lot younger, there was a saying, something like a man's handshake is his bond. Now, whether that was true or not, I don't know. But that was like the saying, you know, you shook hands and that was your truth. But like you're saying, it's so true. What's truth? What is truth? What do you tell your kids? Well, this is true, but they say that, but this is true. It's really an interesting time that we're in. It's a major change. I don't know if it's a negative change or, well, this Zoom could be negative and it's negative and positive. It's a major change that we're going through now, major, in ways that I have no idea, you know, what's going to be the effect of this a year from now. No idea whatsoever. Things are happening so rapid. Even this Zoom, was it here 2 years ago? I have no idea, but I mean, young folks were doing things that I never even imagined when I was a youngster. So change is just occurring. It's the only constant. So what's happening now is just, it's change.
Yeah, and we were talking about Hell's Kitchen back in the 70s. Now,
Right.
Hell's Kitchen now, completely different. But that was over a period of a generation, more than a generation. And all of a sudden, we've got all this just escalated change
In the world.
in 2020. Yeah, so let's
Right.
just put it all into 2020.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So, so all this have had to change. What's been the hardest change for anybody?
Well, I think the hardest change is just not having the personal interaction. And I'm thankful for Zoom that it allows some interaction, but like we have our third Sunday writers and artists group that's been a group of us, a core group of us that's been meeting for over 20 years, probably 25 years every third Sunday. And we're Zooming now. And it's just, you know, I'm happy that we're able to continue. We all bring work to the table. We all read each other's work and we could critique it and have input. And, you know, it's been invaluable to all of us and our various art forms for all these many years. But it's just, you know, so again, it's a plus and minus. I'm happy we're able to still meet, but it's still not the same as meeting in person, the organic nature of all sitting in the same room and sharing food even. And so that's probably been, for me, one of the hardest parts, although thankful that it still happens in some form.
I think the hardest change for me is working my body. For the last 13 plus 7 years, I've lived with canines. And the last one, Kaya, died a little over a year ago, Border Collie Lab. Every day, well, in the early years, I had her from the time she was a puppy. We'd run at Buck Lake 10, 12 miles. And then as we both got older, we slowed down. And up until last year, we were both walking slowly until she passed away. And I really haven't done anything since then. I tell myself, yeah, I have to get out and exercise and work my body, but it's just really difficult. People say, well, get another dog. I don't know if I'd like to go through that again, so I really haven't decided. And even the other difficult thing is I've always been a reclusive in many ways, but I could always go to Home Depot or go anywhere and just be in the presence of people. But now it's like no one wants to be in the presence of anyone else. So I have to put on a mask and you know, so even that, I'm even more reclusive, even though I find myself writing more and putting my words out there. And Facebook, just was involved in a poetry workshop for the last month. So in that way, but with my personal body, it's been more difficult to be present with it. So for me, those are the changes that come to mind right now. That's, you know, to get out there and push myself without Kaya.
Yeah, I'll jump on that. Before COVID, I was up at 4:30 in the morning, and I would go to the gym before I'd go to work. I haven't been to the gym in a year. So what I've done is turn my living room into my own personal gym. So I do an hour of exercise every day. I put on some Netflix and I just, for an hour, I'm either doing a workout with weights, and I don't have weights. What I do have is a lot of bottles of Gatorade that I filled with water and put them in duffel bags, and I do my weights that way. Or I'll just, all right, go ahead, judge me, you can laugh. Richard Simmons from the 80s. There's plenty of videos on YouTube. I put on an hour of Richard Simmons. Yeah, and I'm swinging to the oldies, and it's a great 1 hour workout. And again, we have all these resources. So that's been a change, because now I'm not getting up at 4:30 in the morning. There's nothing to do at 4:30 in the morning. So I get up a couple hours before class, and I have my class, and I'm not on the schedule. So that's, I think, a neutral. You know, that's not a negative. I enjoy going to the gym, but I've managed to work around that. One of the positives on my end is the Zoom teaching. I've been able to maintain my financial situation uninterrupted, said Zoom. I have plenty of friends who have not. I have plenty of friends who have gone for months and months without a paycheck. So that's stressful. And yeah, you take care of the people you love as best you can. So there is a greater sense of community in a very small bubble, even though there's much more distance.
Yeah.
Education-wise, the Zoom teaching, spectacular. We have had excellent results in the past year. I did my first year of college in San Jose, which is right there in Silicon Valley. I was actually part of the very first virtual class. It was an art history class. And it was grant funded from Silicon Valley, Hewlett Packard, and it was horrible. It was not even, it was before the internet. So you get a CD-ROM. I'm going way back here. And you couldn't even take it home. You had to go to the library, you had to check out one of the 3 CD-ROMs and go to a computer and have your virtual class. You never met the instructor whatsoever. So online education has been an absolute failure up until COVID. And I think what this has done is made online education, made it step up, give it the boost that it needed. And because we're having regular classes, because I'm having real-time interaction with the students through Zoom, the results of the work, the product, the students, it's as good or even better in some cases. And as well, for the mental health of the students. So many of them actually appreciate having the meetings, having a face-to-face, having a discussion, having a class community in which all the faces are at the top of the Zoom screen, and we have our little chat room, and we're chit-chatting and discussing ideas, and sometimes dogs and cats and the weather and drawing, and it becomes a 3-hour very productive social event. So there are positives, and I'm really trying to look at the positives, because as I tell my students, we're going to be talking about this for the rest of our lives.
Yeah.
Especially for a 19-year-old, for a 20-year-old, for a college student. This event is going to be discussed for the rest of their lives. And the question is, how are you going to discuss it? What's going to be your story? Is it going to be a story of perseverance? Is it going to be a story of community? Or is it going to be a story of, I got mine, up yours? Is it going to be a story of hoarding your resources and cutting yourself off the community? Or is it going to be a story of helping when you can and accepting help when you need it? So that's what I really stress to the students. This is the the life event you will be discussing. So write your own story.
I like your positive attitude,
Yeah.
especially about the Gatorade bottles and getting up in the morning, because it reminded me, I used to go to the club too in the morning, but so yeah, I like your positive attitude. But as you were just speaking, I also thought about, I don't know how many there are or where they are, of those communities of people that have minimal access to the internet. And where are those kids going to be? I don't know if there are large communities or small communities, but they do exist. And it's great to have these new technological advances, but there are communities that don't have access to them. But I guess that's part of life too, right?
Well, no, you're 100% right on that. And that's something that really is being addressed and needs to be addressed and hasn't been addressed so much until now, because we do have entire communities that do not have access. So that's one of the priorities, especially with the college, is we need to provide access for all students. So there are resources from campus if you don't have access. They're not perfect, but there are some options that are being offered, as opposed to, oh, you live way off with no service, I guess you just don't get educated this year. There are options being offered.
Right.
But that needs to be on a much broader scale.
It's lovely.
So I have two comments. First of all, I'd like to invite people in the audience to type in some questions into the chat so that we can get some of your questions. Later on, we're going to open it up more directly to you, but please do thinking about your questions and putting them in the chat, because we need this dialogue to be not just between the four of us. We need it to be amongst all 30 some of us who are signed into this thing. So, but the discussion that just happened we had a couple of things, and we had some discussion about, well, there's a sense of what's real or what's true, and what isn't real and what isn't true. So we suddenly have a lot of alternate truths out there being sworn to by this or that party, that is to say person or group of people. And so a lot of that is happening via the electronic media and means, and a lot of it's happening perhaps even because of some of that, Facebook. But on the other hand, I've been to a lot of panel discussions and tried to lead other panel discussions. And so far, I would rate this one as one of the most personal ones that I can recall. I'm impressed with how personal people are being and how willing they are to share their personal stuff. And so there's an old saying that I believe and have used when I was a teacher and continue to believe, and that is, the more personal you get, the more universal you get.
Mm-hmm.
So that if you're trying to figure out how to make your art speak to people, you need to make it personal. And the more personal you can make it, the more it will speak to people. And so that's a principle that I kind of operate by. So the question is this, at this point, at this moment in time, it seems like the technology is making this event very personal. Does that make it more real or less real? So you get personal and real. So it's a virtual panel discussion, which has the implication of being not quite real. So what's real and how important is the personal?
Well, you also asked the question earlier, how has the pandemic affected your art? And I was working on a series of of art, a piece of art. It started from one piece of art that was very personal, related to my personal family history. And that's because one of my great, I don't know how many greats grandfathers was vice president under Abraham Lincoln during his first term. And he was involved in, abolitionist movement and civil rights movement, and, was instrumental in Abraham Lincoln signing the Emancipation Proclamation into law. But knowing this man was Hannibal Hamlin, and knowing that, I wondered if my family were slave owners. And so this started me on this path of research of family history back to Hannibal Hamlin and his work under Abraham Lincoln. And that culminated in a fairly large piece of work that took me a long time, and called Mason-Dixon line, the cost of cotton. And the piece has the Mason-Dixon line traveling across it, and the southern states and the northern states. And it's a whole big complicated piece that has family history in it, and US history, and all of that. Of course, there's the Black Lives Matter movement has been around for a long time, but that whole series of pieces, because then that piece has led into other pieces started before COVID. So anyway, I agree with your statement. There's the personal, but then there's this broader worldwide, US-wide phenomenon, and it's all intertwined. And so yeah, there's personal truth, and then there's a larger, more global truth. And it's, so then to have all the, the George Floyd incident, and I still want to write a poem that's like 8 minutes and 45 seconds long, or 46 seconds long, or whatever that time was. It's like, listen to this poem, people, and feel how long that period of time is, that 8 minutes and 46 seconds. And imagine having that knee on your neck for that length of time. So it's just, there's so much that's broad and personal all at the same time. And I'm kind of rambling now and not sure where I'm going with that, but it was interesting that I had started on these pieces about slavery and was already in that mode. And then we hit this COVID year and all the really, really personal stuff for people that were, talk about personal, anybody that knew George Floyd, or anybody, that lost one of these people, you can't get any more personal than that. And so yes, it impacts the art in some way or another, for sure.
Okay, I just spotted a question in the chat. So Andrea Beck asked all the participants, panelists, what ideas do we have that can support art business and communities right now? I am fearful about some of the more fragile art nonprofits and gallery spaces.
I can give a perspective. A lot has to do with what government does. If some countries support their artists, we don't necessarily do that. In this country, art is sort of a side road, and artists generally have to perform on their own and support themselves. There were some organizations, artist organizations, I don't remember the names of them, you folks in the teaching world might know, but they were ended just a few years ago. Support for artists were ended for smaller organizations, for artists trying to create new things. So hopefully some of that will come back to support businesses. But right now, it's like you have COVID affecting people, and even there's no consensus around how that's going to be handled. So with a question like, how do we get back to, it's all involved with COVID. It's involved with where is income coming from? I don't think I've given an answer because I don't think I can, to tell you the truth. Now that I'm reflecting on what I just said, things are so indeterminate right now. Um, I don't know. I really don't know how to answer such a question. So please, I can use some help.
Yeah. Again, I'm going to dance around this because I don't know how to answer it either. Do know that America's horrible with funding the arts.
Right.
America's a business. I mean, let's cut down to it. And funding the arts is not a priority.
Well, sadly, I think that's true, but I do know that there are a lot of organizations locally that have reached out and have come up with grants and ways to help artists. Artist Trust is one of them. For Culture is another. Earshot Jazz, I just recently saw they have the Seattle Jazz Relief Fund. That application, there's a deadline coming up the end of the month for that, in fact. And then even Etsy, I've seen resources on Etsy and Artwork. There's another organization called Artwork Archive. So it's, of course, those are all arts organizations, but I agree, it would be nice if the government would support the arts more than they do, because that's really necessary. But at least there are arts organizations that are trying to help support art and artists in various ways with grants and funding. In terms of smaller galleries and some of the, like the gallery that tried to show the tactile show that I referenced earlier, I worry about them too. I don't know how galleries are going to stay alive, other than, trying for some of the small business grants that are available.
And most art sales prior to this have been online. So there is still that avenue. Most sales, even in blue chip galleries, have been online sales. But there's not a lot of money floating around right now for the purchase of art. People, many of us are stretched as far as we can go. There's not a lot of extra money to be spent. We want to consider, when this is over, what do we want in our community left? Do we want Walmart? Is that what we want in our communities? Is that where we're going to shop through COVID? Are we going to shop at COVID so Walmart will be the only one standing after this? Or are we going to shop at our locally owned businesses? Maybe spend a couple more bucks. That's called support. And that goes for galleries. That goes for these smaller art businesses as well. Where are you going to spend your money? And not just based on what's the best deal, but based on the long game. When this is all over, what's your community going to look like? Because if it looks like Walmart and that's all there is, I'll start packing my bags right now. That's not the community I want to live in. I want to be in a community that actually has that support locally.
Michael, you said something.
Go ahead. Okay, go ahead.
You said something earlier that I related with, and I write about on occasion, and that is we live in a country, in a culture that if there's going to be investment in anything, it has to generate income, which is why, education generates income potentially 5-10 years down the road, which is why our education system isn't financed. Art will generate income for a few individuals, and investors, shareholders don't receive much from that. So there's not a lot of investment in art. There is investment in weapons. There is investment in things that generate income. Large businesses, you mentioned Walmart. There's investment there because they generate income. We live in, what is it called, a capitalistic country? There's no people in the word capital. It's it's a great system in some ways, but in other ways, capital is about income. It's not about healthcare. How much money is in healthcare? Not much. So the person who called in, Alan, I don't really know. I mean, it's a larger picture than how is my business going to be supported.
So here's another one from the chat. Carolyn Hartsey says there is nothing more personal than art, so important now as a deeply emotional vehicle and a source of spiritual expression, where these, I can't see that, this expression, where in this time of physical, emotional, and spiritual mental crisis, art tells our stories. Any area-wide artist organizations or alliances that include artists of nation? We can answer that live.
I don't know. I can answer that typing or live. I don't know.
Yeah, let's answer live if we can.
So one organization that's area-wide is called Artist Trust, and that it's an organization for artists of all types, performance artists, and visual artists, and poets, and writing, and so on. And so they have a number of programs that support artists. They have special insurance places for where artists can get in, and they have some major grants. So that's an organization. That's a statewide organization, and it's and you can join it and become a member, and you can they have a variety of programs. They have artist training programs that teach you how to be a better business person as an artist, to manage your business. So that's one I can mention. Okay.
Yeah, that's a Artist Trust is a really good one. Also for writers, there's a Hugo House in Seattle, and they do a lot of support of literary works, and have lots of different types of writing classes. And so for the literary arts, I could mention Hugo House in Seattle.
Okay, so in Kitsap County, there's Cultural Arts Foundation Northwest that gives grants to artists who reside in Kitsap County. So there's probably organizations like that in many counties, if most. I would say many. And so I would mention that. So it's something a person can, there's a lot of private foundations that give support to artists and of a variety of different kinds. So I would say just Google some of artist support ones. So here's one. Carolyn Hartness says NWAC is not a nonprofit organization. The artists work collaboration in design, manage, and project space creative work that is affordable, energy efficient, and durable and sustainable. So those are product ones. And Caroline Barnes, do you see there is a particular social role or emphasis of art and artists that has changed or should change due to COVID-19 experience?
I can give an answer from my perspective. This experience, COVID-19, I think a few things have come up for me. When I write, I think spirit, or when I do my art or everything, I don't think it's me. I think it's coming through me and it's a spirit pronouncement. With COVID, I think it's a few factors involved. One is aloneness. We live in a culture where aloneness isn't comfortable. I mean, even not wearing masks or having to be partying or being with other people. So we're now in a situation where aloneness is in a way being forced upon us to have the experience of it. Um, my art reflects a lot these days on death, on spirit. I think that my art reflects on, again, death is around us more. It's been around us, but we avoid it. You know, the older folks we push aside so we don't have to look at them. And so right now, every day, many of us are face to face with relatives, and some communities are face to face with that all the time. So a lot of my writing these days is about life and death. And my take on that is that one isn't better than the other. They're connected. You know, if you just walk through the woods and look at all the trees that are fallen, it's like death sprouts new life. So we look at our culture, death, as being totally separate from the living. I don't, even though I'm part of this culture. It's all connected. So yeah, that's my reflection on what my writings are lately and how I feel lately about that question. Don't know if I've answered it at all, but that's my feeling about it.
Any other answers?
I don't want to get on a soapbox here, but I think we've learned in the past year we're on our own. You know, the government is not there for us. What we've heard is an 8-month debate to get us a couple $100 in our pockets. And that's called emergency relief. 8 months to debate over emergency relief. So it's unprecedented. No, it's not unprecedented. Didn't this happen 100 years ago? And didn't happen 100 years before that? Couldn't you set your watch to how often this has happened? Didn't we just have SARS? Wasn't that a thing? Oh, it didn't affect us, so that doesn't really count. But that was a thing. We had polio. We had 2008. What is unprecedented about this? And how could our governments be so unprepared for this? Because we're on our own. And I think that's the takeaway from this. The emphasis is, the captain of the ship doesn't know where it's going. And we've got to really make a point to take proactive measures to take care of ourselves. And that gets much less positive than I've been throughout. But that's one thing I have learned, especially seeing people struggle and wait for the crumbs of a crust of bread from the government while they do whatever they can to get by. And we're not even going to talk about the foreclosures, because I don't want to, I'll start pounding my fists and no one wants to see that. But that's the social role. The emphasis is the realization that, we've got to take care of ourselves. We've got to come together as a community and not rely on those who said they'll take care of us, because they're not going to.
You said something I can relate with, and that is taking care of community and taking care of ourselves. We have a number of communities in this country. You know, they're all different religions and looks and different communities, and they don't relate as a community. One of the differences here, I mean, you look at other countries, like at some of the Northern European countries, up until recently, they were homogenous. There were only one community to take care of. So here we have, red, white, brown, we have all different kinds of communities that are interested in their particular dynamic. And I think in one perspective, the dynamic that's affecting all of us is nature, is the climate, are the icebergs melting. And my sense is that if many of us would come together around something that affects us all, but every separate community would say, yeah, but my community is more important. Well, if we run out of water and air to breathe, then all of our communities will be affected. So I think if we were to just somehow, I don't know who's going to be the goalpost or the leader in this, or if there need be a leader, or if we can all just within our own mind frames decide that I want my kids to breathe and have clean water. That's something that we can all agree on. So I suggest let's just start on something that we can all communicate about. You know, sure, we have the black and white and this and suffering and yellow and brown. Yeah, but we're all breathing the same air, walking on the same earth, drinking the same water. And even though half the country is in denial, you know, it's about profit. Let's dig some wells for oil, or cut down a mountain for some minerals. If more of us come together about life and not destruction, I think that could be a goalpost.
So I would add that I think in many ways this is already happening, but so like Carolyn Burns says, do you see that there's a particular social role or emphasis in art that artists have changed or should change? That's what we're talking about. So the fact of the matter is I think, you know, artists are more than almost ever moved into the community and tried to communicate through everything from performance art to public murals to to try to relate to these things. So I think artists are instinctively doing that, and there's much more discussion of that in my sense in the higher level, college and university level of artists should be looking at questions in life, and as opposed to it's more than just about how to draw. About the technical skills. You need the technical skills. They're very important as well. But I think, so we need both things. We need the technical skills, how to make art that somehow or other engages the public and that involves often many technical skills, but also the importance of engaging, you know, that's a goal, you might say, in there. So I hope that's a little helpful, Carol. And I have another one from to read here. Carolyn Hartness, Arts Northwest. In response to tight budgets, travel concerns, and safety of everyone, Arts Northwest is exploring the possibility of creating a series of mini conferences in the fall of 2021. We want to potentially strengthen our routing blocks to see colleagues and creativity find a way to gather as many as we can safely to recharge, renew, and be inspired. These gatherings would take place in Idaho, Washington, and Oregon. This format would allow us to provide resources for our members without financial burden and attending a 4-day conference. We envision this to be a way for us to gather more regionally and give a chance to network and see how artists via video live and inspire all to what comes next for the world of performing arts.
Danny Gray had a comment in chat which we did not read yet.
Okay. Where is she? Oh, there he is. She is. Okay.
Oh,
Danny feels that the best way to reach out and support communities is to do it ourselves. For example, there's a wonderful gathering spot here in Bremerton that was in danger of closing this year, and the community responded. Drives, Kickstarters, community itself come together and save the business. we are stronger together and we have the power to vote with our dollars and to raise each other up. So it's not a question, but it's a comment. It's a good comment.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So in order to support our community, we have to join our community.
Also, speaking of the Bremerton community, I thought that Amy Burnett did a fabulous job with her kind of walk-by, drive-by gallery situation that she did earlier this year. She had portraits of people that she had painted that she put in the window of her gallery for people to drive by and walk by. I don't think that's up anymore, but I thought it was a fabulous idea.
And Lawrence would like to speak.
We have one from Ann Lawrence, you say?
Yeah,
Okay, can you hear me?
yes.
Okay,
Great.
thank
Yes.
you. I am fairly new to this community. I moved here from New Jersey with my husband about 1.5 years ago. And we were just getting settled in Bremerton just a very few months before COVID hit. So I haven't really had the opportunity to explore what's in this area in the way of arts. I was very fortunate in New Jersey in that I was a member of a large alliance, the Willingboro Art Alliance, who did regular weekly workshops. They had studios with modeling available. It was a very economical organization. In terms of joining, it was like $30 to join. The workshops were $1. Well, what was nice is that there were several, there were probably a couple hundred members over a large county, and they were very involved in producing art, many professional artists, and then displaying art within different businesses, hospitals, nursing homes. Anyways, it was a very large organization, and I was really sorry to lose that connection when we moved out here. So I kind of feel adrift. I would like to connect with other visual artists in the community, and this is why I'm just wondering what is out there, or if there's any groups that get together and either for instruction or discussion. And so that's kind of why I wanted to join you guys today, to kind of to get a little piece of what's happening in this area with the art. So I guess that's, if anyone that's here today has any suggestions or ideas, I'd really appreciate it.
I think Collective Visions is a great place to start for that. It sounds like, yeah, a commercial all of a sudden, but isn't that the point of Collective Visions?
I guess it's essentially a community gallery. So it is an association of artists that work together, and we're always interested in new members. We have a new member application process. You can go online and find a form, or the gallery. One of the good things for us, in a way, at Collective Visions Gallery is that when COVID hit, almost all of our members were over 60. So even when things started to open up, they weren't open for people who were over 60. They were supposed to continue to stay sheltered. And so what we had always been in the habit of, every member had to sit the desk in turn. So it was a different person every time. And so what we did is, ultimately we decided that model was no longer going to work for us. And we, for the first time, hired an employee. And so we now have a gallery manager named Cindy. And and that enabled us to be open. We weren't able to be open at all up to that point. And we did have some sidewalk walk-by shows, much like Amy Burnett, who's across the street from us. But we now are open Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday from 11 till 4. So we have a physical presence. And when we were designing this year's CVG show, we really had to grapple with that. We didn't know whether we were going to be able to be open or not, but we decided to go ahead and have a physical show like we have, so that the actual art is here for you to actually come and see in downtown Bremerton on those somewhat limited hours, but they're not that terrible. And that I think is going to be one of the things that saved us. So it was a hard decision for us to make, to spend money instead of volunteering to keep the gallery open. And I think that one of the pluses is that seeing the show online is nothing compared to going down there and walking through the gallery. You can read what the scale of things are, but you can't experience it without going down there. And there's a lot of other aspects. So I would strongly encourage anyone who hasn't been to see the show, be sure and come in before the show closes at the end of February.
May I just add, Anne, I've had my work in there. It's a great gallery. Go do it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Well, it sounds like a fabulous organization you had in New Jersey. Is that what you said? I'm not familiar with anything exactly like that in this area, but sounds fabulous if we were to get something like that organized. Although I highly recommend the CVG gallery as well. But in terms of like a larger organization, it sounded like that was pretty all-encompassing.
Yeah, it was an older organization, really well organized, and like this group, it sounds like I would say a lot of people that were 60 plus, with some younger people. But I was working. I'm now getting ready to retire in just a few months, and I really would enjoy getting involved in something like that again. So I'm glad to hear about the gallery. I'll have to put that on my list to go and check. I think that I may have been there once, but someone had told me it was closed. So I'm happy to hear that it's open. I definitely will check it out.
So I think we should take one or two more questions, but I think we're kind of winding down. So anybody have, are there any more questions here?
Yes. Carolyn Hartness asked, how do we feel about crafts during the time of people being home and needing a way to express themselves?
You know, I think there are so many creative ways for people to express themselves. How do we feel about it? I say, go for it. whatever creative aspect, you know, I mean, that is just so wide open in my mind. Writing in a journal, doodling, you know, needlepoint, knitting. I think it's all good for the heart, mind, and soul. If you want to try it, go for it. That would be my response.
Yeah, and again, you know, what's going to happen at the end of this? What are you going to have at the end of this? Just, wow, I've seen everything on Netflix. I've seen the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe, and I watched Tiger King 3 times. Is that going to be your story of the pandemic? Yeah, crafts, sketching, doing something, taking on something that that fills that time, and not with just, I don't want to be too harsh on Netflix, but come on, it's garbage. Not just with this mindless garbage that's filling our the biggest event of some of our lives.
I really don't know the difference between crafts and art. I mean, I see people that have woven baskets and done other worked with beads, and I don't know if those are called crafts, but to me, those are artists at work or craftspeople at work. There are artists who are craftspeople, so I'm not sure how it's different. When people create things, be it called art or crafts, for me, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. So yeah, folks, create, create, create.
And again, back to, we couldn't have even done this 10 years ago without the technology we have. There's nothing that I teach in my class that isn't available somewhere online. So yeah, learn figure drawing. How? Well, there's 10,000 videos online for free. My job is just to facilitate the process and then, dole out the grades at the end. But yeah, take this and maybe take this as a time to be like, what can I actually invest my time in? And if you don't know where to start, yeah, I don't want to start pushing YouTube and talk about crap, but it actually is a spectacular resource.
It is. So, I mean, it's like fire. All these technologies are like fire. You can get burned or you can warm your behind with them, so they can warm your soul. And that's what I would say. I'm going to, as kind of a final act, I'm going to ask Rose to put up Nancy Coleman's "What is the Constitution?" which happens to be my favorite piece in the work. And I will talk just a little bit about it. And it's one of the ones that really, you have to go and see it to really experience it and appreciate it.
Who's the artist?
Nancy Coleman, called "What is the Constitution?" So this is a very large painting. It's 8 feet wide and it's 6 feet tall. And it's actually on 6 separate panels. And if you look carefully in the upper right corner, you can see the word Constitution.
Mm.
And you can vaguely see "we the people" in the upper left-hand corner. But those are very hard to see and understand unless you're actually standing in front of this thing. So what Nancy has done is, this is a piece of calligraphy. She has done a calligraphic version of the entire, every page of the basic Constitution document. Wow. And she's overlaid those calligraphies. So she changes the color and the ink so that one line will go over the top of something she previously wrote in layers upon layers. So the layers of it are a little bit like a Jackson Pollock dance painting. So it's got lots of kind of visual depth of surface. And all of the colors in it are they're what I call responsive. So as you walk by, they change. So sometimes different parts as you move past it, it visually changes. And you can see things from one angle that you cannot see from another angle because the inks are all somewhat reflexive and reflective. And this is my favorite piece. I feel like it's very much of our time. I feel like it's a fabulous idea. Some of you may know the work of Mark Tobey, who was a Pacific Northwest artist of the mid-20th century that was very prominent. He did lots of kind of overlaid calligraphy things in more Oriental style calligraphy. So anyway, I'm going to close with that. Here's a piece of art for us to enjoy. Go down to the gallery and take a look at it, examine it carefully, and I promise you will be rewarded. So thank you to everybody who attended this. It's been fun for all of us, I think.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you, Alan, Rose, and Fred and Michael. I've enjoyed being here talking to everybody.
Yes, Thank you all
Thank you
very
all.
much, to Rose, the behind the scene hero here, but also to I think our panelists have been excellent, wonderful things to say and insights. So thank you very much. And I think the questions from the audience, I wish it was easier to do that, but we got through a number of them. And thanks to everyone. We'll do it again.
Thank you so much, Fred, and wonderful meeting you in these circumstances. And before I'd like to go, I would just like to add one last thing. Susan Bowers asked a wonderful question in chat. We don't have time, so short answer, hell yes.
Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rose.